Subscribe to STORYLAB for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. Curtis Porter stood in his kitchen, methodically preparing coffee as the morning sun filtered through the windows of his modest suburban home. At 45, he appeared to be just another insurance adjuster living a quiet life in Denver. His calloused hands moved with practiced precision, a detail most people missed, along with the way his eyes constantly swept the room, cataloging exits and potential threats. "Dad, I'm nervous about the presentation today," his daughter Ada Collins said, bouncing into the kitchen. She'd kept her mother's maiden name when they'd moved here 15 years ago, another layer of their carefully constructed new identity. Curtis smiled genuinely, his weathered face softening. Ada was 20, a junior at Colorado State studying international relations. She had her mother's intelligence and his determination, though she knew nothing of the life he'd lived before she was born. "You'll do fine, sweetheart. You've got more steel in you than you realize." He handed her a travel mug of coffee. "Just remember what I taught you about reading people." Ada laughed. "Your insurance investigator wisdom again?" "Dad, sometimes I think you missed your calling as a detective." If only she knew. Curtis Porter was a fabricated identity, complete with tax records, employment history, and social media presence. The man who'd raised Ada had once been known in covert circles as the Ghost, a psychological warfare specialist who'd spent 2 decades making problems disappear for various government agencies. He'd retired when Ada's mother died of cancer, choosing to raise his daughter in peaceful anonymity. "Call me when you get back to the dorm tonight," he said, kissing her forehead. "I love you, kiddo." After Ada left, Curtis settled into his home office, surrounded by insurance files and family photos. His laptop chimed with an encrypted message. His old handler, William Estes, still checked in quarterly to ensure his cover remained intact. Today's message was routine, package secure, weather clear. Curtis deleted the message and returned to his legitimate work, reviewing a suspicious fire claim. He'd built this life carefully, choosing insurance investigation because it utilized his skills while keeping him off anyone's radar. He was good at spotting lies, analyzing patterns, and most importantly, staying invisible. His phone rang around lunch. Unknown number. "Mr. Porter? This is campus security at Colorado State. Your daughter didn't return to her dorm last night, and she missed her morning classes. Her roommate is concerned." The coffee mug in Curtis's hand cracked as his grip tightened. "What do you mean she didn't return? We're trying to piece together her movements. She was last seen leaving the library around 9 p.m. Her car is still in the parking lot, but there's no sign of struggle. We've contacted local police, but since it's only been 12 hours, Curtis was already moving, grabbing keys and a go bag he'd hoped never to use again. "I'm on my way." The drive to Fort Collins took 2 hours. Curtis used every minute to shift back into operational mode, his suburban father persona falling away like shed skin. He called in favors from old contacts, accessed databases that officially didn't exist, and began building a timeline of Ada's last known movements. At the campus, he met with Detective Carmen Schneider, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who treated him with professional courtesy tinged with suspicion. "Mr. Porter, I know you're worried, but most missing college students turn up within 48 hours. Could she have gone somewhere with friends? A boyfriend, perhaps?" Curtis showed her Ada's phone records, which he'd accessed through channels Detective Schneider couldn't imagine. "She called me at 8:47 p.m. from the library. Her phone was turned off at 9:23 p.m., 2 blocks from campus. Ada doesn't turn off her phone." "How did you get these records so quickly?" "I have contacts in the insurance industry. We deal with fraud investigations." The lie came smoothly. Curtis had spent years perfecting his cover story. They walked through Ada's last known route. Curtis's trained eye caught details the police had missed. Tire marks from a vehicle that had stopped abruptly, a small piece of fabric caught on a fence, security cameras that had been subtly repositioned. "Detective, I need to ask you something," Curtis said as they concluded their walk through. "In your experience, do college students just vanish without leaving digital footprints? No ATM usage, no social media activity, no contact with friends." Carmen's expression grew serious. "No, Mr. Porter, they don't." Chapter 2. The Call. Curtis spent the next 18 hours methodically investigating. He'd checked into a motel near campus and transformed his room into a command center, using skills that had lain dormant for 15 years. His laptop displayed traffic camera footage, cell tower data, and facial recognition results from every camera within a 5-mile radius of Ada's disappearance. He'd found 3 anomalies: a van with obscured license plates that had circled the campus twice before Ada's disappearance, a gap in surveillance footage that indicated professional tampering, and cell phone metadata showing several burner phones active in the area that night, phones that had since gone dark. Detective Schneider had been surprisingly helpful, though Curtis could see she was starting to wonder about his unusual investigative capabilities. He'd fed her just enough information to keep the official investigation moving while conducting his own parallel operation. His phone rang at 3:17 a.m. Unknown number again, but this time the caller ID showed it was bouncing through multiple international servers, a sign that whoever was calling knew about electronic surveillance. "Mr. Porter?" The voice was middle-aged, confident, with a slight accent Curtis couldn't immediately place. Or should I say ghost? Curtis's blood turned to ice. After 15 years of perfect cover, someone had found him. "I think you have the wrong number. Your daughter is a beautiful girl. Smart, too. She tried to fight when we took her, just like her father would have. The fire in her eyes, it reminds me of you." The phone creaked in Curtis's grip. "Who is this?" "Someone who's been looking for you for a very long time. You see, Ghost, you made a lot of enemies in your previous life. Men you destroyed, families you ruined. Did you really think you could just disappear and live happily ever after?" Curtis's mind raced through possibilities. He'd been careful to eliminate loose ends when he retired, but in 20 years of covert operations, there had been dozens of targets. Anyone could have held a grudge long enough to track him down. "What do you want?" "Justice. You took everything from me once. Now I'll take everything from you. Your precious daughter belongs to us now. Forget her." The line went quiet for a moment. Then Curtis heard something that made his heart stop. Ada's voice, distant but unmistakable. "Dad? Dad, don't listen to them. There." The sound cut off abruptly. Curtis closed his eyes and accessed the coldest, most calculating part of himself, the part that had earned him his nickname. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of 20 years' worth of ghosts. "For 20 years, governments called me the Ghost to make men like you disappear. You have exactly 1 hour to bring her back unharmed, or I will demonstrate why that name still makes people wake up screaming." Laughter. "You're just an insurance adjuster now, old man. What could you possibly—" 59 minutes, Curtis said, and hung up. He immediately began tracing the call, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he accessed systems that technically didn't exist. The call had bounced through servers in Prague, Lagos, and Singapore before terminating at a satellite phone somewhere in the western United States. Sophisticated, but not sophisticated enough for someone with Curtis's access. While his trace programs ran, he opened another laptop and began accessing encrypted files he'd hoped never to need again. Bank account numbers in the Caymans. Weapons caches he'd maintained just in case. Contact information for mercenaries, hackers, and other specialists who operated in the gray spaces between legal and illegal. Most importantly, he accessed a file labeled Phoenix Protocol, his emergency plan for burning down his old life if it ever caught up with him. Detective Schneider called as he was loading funds into untraceable cryptocurrency accounts. "Mr. Porter, we've had a break in the case. Highway Patrol found a van matching our description abandoned about 40 miles west of here. There's evidence of a struggle inside, and—" She paused. "There's blood. Not a lot, but enough to suggest someone was injured." Curtis felt a cold rage building in his chest. "I'll be right there." "Mr. Porter, there's something else. We ran the van's VIN number. It was reported stolen 3 days ago from a rental agency in Phoenix. The theft report was filed by a company called Meridian Logistics." Curtis's blood froze. He knew that name. Meridian Logistics was a front company he'd investigated years ago while working for the CIA. They specialized in human trafficking, moving packages across international borders for clients who could afford their premium services. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. 58 minutes. Curtis hung up with Detective Schneider and made a call he'd hoped never to make again. William? It's Phoenix. I need everything you have on Meridian Logistics. Someone's taken my daughter, and they know who I am. It was a long pause. Jesus Christ, Curtis. I thought that operation was dead and buried. So did I. How long do you need? Give me 20 minutes. And Curtis? If Meridian has her, you're going to need more than just information. Curtis was already planning for that contingency. Chapter 3. The Network Revealed. 55 minutes after the call, Curtis's phone rang again. He'd spent the time systematically dismantling his Curtis Porter identity and resurrecting resources from his previous life. Money had been moved, contacts activated, and weapons retrieved from a storage unit he'd maintained under a false name. Your hour is up, Ghost, the caller said, amusement evident in his voice. And your organization is burning down around you, Curtis replied calmly. What are you talking about? Curtis checked his laptop screen, where real-time feeds showed the results of 20 minutes worth of preparation. Phoenix office of Meridian Logistics, fire department responding to a mysterious electrical fire that somehow triggered all the sprinkler systems simultaneously, destroying your servers. Your warehouse in Tucson. Anonymous tip to Border Patrol about suspicious activities has resulted in a raid. Your money laundering operation in Vegas. IRS audit scheduled for tomorrow morning, along with visits from the FBI. The silence on the other end told Curtis he'd struck home. You see, Curtis continued, you made one critical error. You thought Curtis Porter was all I had become. But Curtis Porter was just a mask. Underneath, I'm still the man who spent 20 years learning how to destroy organizations like yours. The difference is, now it's personal. You're bluffing. There's no way you could. Check the news, Curtis said, and hung up. His phone immediately rang again, but this time it was William Estes. Curtis, what the hell have you done? I'm seeing activity across multiple agencies, all targeting Meridian assets. Did you just activate Phoenix Protocol? They have Ada. I told you I need more than information. Jesus. All right, listen carefully. Meridian isn't just a trafficking operation. They're a vengeance business. Rich people pay them to make their enemies suffer. The man who took your daughter is Angelo Law. He runs their Western operations, but more importantly, he's the son of Victor Law. Curtis felt pieces clicking into place. Victor Law, a Romanian arms dealer he'd killed in Budapest 12 years ago during an operation to shut down weapons flowing to terrorist cells. Curtis had made it look like a heart attack, but apparently someone had figured out the truth. Angelo has been looking for you since his father died. He's turned it into an obsession. Meridian gave him the resources to keep searching. Where is he? That's the problem. Our intelligence suggests he has multiple locations throughout Colorado and Utah. Safe houses, storage facilities, legitimate businesses that serve as fronts. But Curtis, there's something else you need to know about Ada's kidnapping. What? It wasn't random. Angelo has been watching her for months, maybe longer. This was planned specifically to draw you out. He doesn't just want to kill you. He wants to break you first. Curtis absorbed this information while monitoring news feeds on his other screen. The attacks on Meridian facilities were having the desired effect. Chaos, confusion, and most importantly, communication between their various cells as they try to understand what was happening. His phone buzzed with another text. Your daughter screams beautifully when she's afraid. Instead of rage, Curtis felt the cold calculation that had made him legendary in intelligence circles. Angelo Law wanted to play psychological games. Curtis would show him what psychological warfare actually looked like. He opened an encrypted communications app and sent a message to a dozen different contacts, mercenaries, hackers, and fixers he'd worked with over the years. The message was simple. Phoenix is active. Premium rates for 48-hour availability. Then he called Detective Schneider. Detective, I need to tell you something about my background. I wasn't entirely truthful earlier. Mr. Porter, if you have information relevant to this case. I'm former CIA, deep cover operations. My daughter was taken by people connected to my previous work. I need you to coordinate with federal authorities because this is about to become much bigger than a missing person case. There was a long pause. Mr. Porter, if that's true, why didn't you say something earlier? Because I've been retired for 15 years, and I'd hoped that life would never touch my family. I was wrong. Another message came through on his secure phone, this one from a contact in Eastern Europe. Law family has contract killers en route to Colorado. ETA, 6 hours. Curtis smiled grimly. Angelo Law was escalating, which meant Curtis was applying the right kind of pressure. But it also meant the window for getting Ada back safely was closing rapidly. His regular phone rang. Detective Schneider. Mr. Porter, we just got word from the FBI. They're taking over the case based on federal kidnapping charges. They want to speak with you immediately. Detective, I appreciate everything you've done, but from this point forward, this becomes a federal matter. For what it's worth, you're a good cop. You deserve to know the truth. My daughter was taken because of who I used to be, not who I am now. Curtis hung up and began making final preparations. Angelo Law wanted the ghost. He was about to get more than he'd bargained for. Chapter 4. Hunting Shadows. 6 hours later, Curtis sat in the back of a black SUV driven by Mike Hurley, a former Delta Force operator who'd worked with Curtis on 3 different continents. In the passenger seat, Josh Doherty, a cyber warfare specialist, monitored electronic communications across Colorado while simultaneously coordinating with their 3rd team member. Phoenix Base, this is Doherty. I've got eyes on Law's communication network. They're using encrypted radio frequencies, but I'm tracking the relay points. Looks like they have 4 active locations in the Denver metro area. Curtis studied the tactical display on Josh's laptop. What about the girl? No direct confirmation, but there's increased chatter at a facility in the mountains west of Boulder. Could be where they're holding her. Mike glanced in the rearview mirror. Curtis, you know this could be a trap. Law wants you to find him. I'm counting on it. Curtis checked his weapon, a Sig Sauer P226 he'd retrieved from his emergency cache. But first, we're going to visit Mr. Law's business associates. I want him to understand that taking my daughter has consequences beyond just me. Their first target was a legitimate-seeming accounting firm in downtown Denver that served as a money laundering front for Meridian. Curtis's intelligence indicated that Jonathan Collins, the firm's managing partner, was actually Angelo Law's cousin and financial operations coordinator. The building's security was impressive for an accounting firm. Too impressive. Curtis noted the armed guards, reinforced glass, and multiple surveillance cameras as they conducted their surveillance from across the street. Doherty, can you access their system? Already in. Their network security is decent, but they made the classic mistake of connecting their security cameras to the same network as their financial systems. Josh's fingers flew across his keyboard. I can give you a 10-minute window where their cameras will loop old footage. Make it happen. Curtis and Mike entered the building through the parking garage, moving with the fluid coordination of men who'd worked together before. The security guard at the elevator bank never had a chance to react before Mike's sleeper hold rendered him unconscious. Jonathan Collins was working late in his corner office, reviewing what appeared to be legitimate financial documents. He looked up in alarm as Curtis and Mike entered without knocking. Who are you? How did you get past security? Curtis sat down across from Collins's desk, his demeanor calm and professional. Mr. Collins, or should I call you by your real name, Jonathan Law? I'm here about your cousin Angelo's recent business venture. Collins's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Your cousin kidnapped my daughter to get my attention. He has it. Now you're going to help me get her back. I don't know anything about a kidnapping. I run an accounting firm. Curtis nodded to Mike, who pulled out his phone and showed Collins a series of photographs. These were taken at Meridian's Phoenix office this morning, just before it burned down. Recognize any of the faces? Collins stared at photos of his own employees fleeing the burning building. How did you? 20 years ago, governments paid me to make problems disappear. Your cousin has given me a new problem to solve. The question is, are you part of the problem or part of the solution? Curtis leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. I know about the accounts in the Caymans. I know about the shell companies in Delaware. I know about the safe houses and the transportation routes. What I don't know is where my daughter is being held. You're going to tell me. Collins was sweating now. Angelo will kill me if I talk. Angelo is going to have bigger problems than you very soon. But if you help me get my daughter back, I'll make sure you disappear before your cousin realizes you were involved. New identity, new life, witness protection through channels that don't officially exist. Mike's earpiece crackled. Phoenix Base, we've got movement. Law's people are mobilizing at multiple locations. Looks like they know you're active. Curtis stood up. Mr. Collins, you have 30 seconds to decide whether you want to be a victim or a survivor. Collins stared at him for a long moment, then reached for his computer. There's a compound in the mountains. An old mining operation Angelo bought through a shell company. If he's keeping someone there, it would be that location. Curtis memorized the coordinates Collins provided, then signaled to Mike. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Collins. For your own safety, I suggest you take a long vacation starting tonight. As they prepare to leave, Collins called out, Wait. There's something else you should know about Angelo. He's not just angry about his father. He's dying. Inoperable brain tumor. He's got maybe 6 months to live, and he wants to spend them making you suffer. Curtis paused at the door. That changed everything. A man with nothing to lose was infinitely more dangerous than someone motivated by simple revenge. Mike, change of plans. We're not just rescuing Ada. We're ending this tonight. Chapter 5, The Compound. The mining compound sat in a valley 40 miles west of Boulder, accessible only by a narrow mountain road that would be perfect for an ambush. Curtis studied the satellite imagery Josh had acquired, noting the defensive positions, guard towers, and kill zones that had been established around the main buildings. It's a fortress, Mike observed from the passenger seat of their tactical vehicle. Maybe 12 to 15 hostiles, heavy weapons, multiple escape routes. They're ready for us. Curtis smiled grimly. Good. That means they're thinking defensively instead of offensively. Josh, what's our electronic situation? They've got signal jammers running, but I can still monitor their radio traffic. They know we're coming. Angelo's been broadcasting his intentions to his people for the last hour. He wants this to be a showdown. From his position in the back of the vehicle, Curtis could see the compound through high-powered binoculars. Movement in the guard towers, vehicles positioned to block the main road, and something that made his heart pound, a figure in the main building's top-floor window that could be Ada. There, he said, handing the binoculars to Mike. Northwest window, 3rd floor. Mike looked, then nodded. Could be her. Building's concrete and steel, old mining headquarters. They've reinforced it recently. Curtis's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Come alone or she dies. 1 hour. Instead of responding, Curtis opened his tactical bag and began assembling a device Josh had provided, a signal amplifier that would override their jamming equipment for approximately 30 seconds. Enough time to send one message. Josh, I need you to patch me through to every law enforcement frequency in Colorado. Federal, state, and local. Curtis, what are you doing? Mike asked. Something Angelo Law won't expect. I'm calling in the cavalry. When Josh nodded that the connection was ready, Curtis spoke clearly into the microphone. This is former CIA operative Curtis Porter, designation Phoenix. I am transmitting coordinates for an active human trafficking operation. Armed suspects, estimated 15 hostiles, holding at least one kidnapped victim. This is a federal crime scene, and I am requesting immediate backup. He provided the compound's exact location, then signaled Josh to cut the transmission. Mike stared at him. You just painted a target on your back with every agency in the country. No, I just gave Angelo Law a bigger problem than me. In 20 minutes, this place will be swarming with federal agents. He can't fight me and them simultaneously. Curtis's phone rang immediately. Angelo Law, you think bringing the FBI will save your daughter? I'll kill her the moment I see government vehicles. Then you'd better hope they don't show up, Curtis replied calmly. But since I can already hear helicopters in the distance, you might want to reconsider your options. The sound was faint but unmistakable, rotors beating against mountain air. Here's what's going to happen, Angelo. You're going to release my daughter and surrender to federal authorities. In exchange, I won't tell them about the weapons cache you have in the basement or the fact that 3 of your men have warrants for terrorism-related activities. How could you possibly know about? Because I've been watching your organization for 6 hours. I know about the C4 in Building 3, the hostages you're holding in the eastern bunker, and the escape tunnel that leads to the old mine shaft. Most importantly, I know you're sick and you're desperate to make this count. The line went quiet for a long moment. You want a final confrontation with the man who killed your father? Fine, but let's do it properly. Release all the hostages, send your men away, and face me alone. If you win, you get your revenge. If I win, your operation dies with you. And if I refuse? Curtis looked through his binoculars at the approaching helicopters. Then in 15 minutes, you'll be dealing with a federal raid, and your chance for personal vengeance disappears forever. Another long pause, then Angelo's voice, tight with anger. Building 5. Come alone. Curtis handed his weapons to Mike. This ends now. Curtis, this is suicide. Let the feds handle it. The feds will turn this into a siege. People will die, possibly including Ada. This way it stays between Angelo and me. Curtis checked his watch. Give me 20 minutes. If I'm not back by then, guide the federal agents to the hostages. As Curtis walked toward the compound, he could see figures moving in the buildings. Law's men withdrawing to defensive positions. In the distance, the helicopters were getting closer. Angelo Law was running out of time, which made him infinitely more dangerous. But Curtis had spent 20 years learning how to turn desperation into defeat. Chapter 6, Face to Face. Building 5 was an old equipment storage facility that had been converted into a meeting space. Curtis entered through the main door, noting the strategic positioning, multiple exits, high ceiling that negated most cover, and clear sight lines that favored someone familiar with the space. Angelo Law stood at the far end of the room, a man in his early 40s with his father's build but harder eyes. Next to him, tied to a chair, was Ada. She was conscious, alert, and Curtis could see the defiance in her expression even from across the room. The legendary ghost, Angelo said, his accent more pronounced now. You're smaller than I imagined. Curtis kept his hands visible as he walked closer, but his eyes were cataloging everything. Angelo's position, Ada's condition, potential weapons, escape routes. Your father was smaller too. Didn't stop him from thinking he was invincible. My father was a businessman. You murdered him. Your father sold weapons to terrorists. I stopped him. Curtis stopped about 15 feet away, close enough to talk normally, but far enough to react if Angelo made a move. Just like I'm going to stop you. Angelo laughed, but there was no humor in it. Stop me? You're unarmed, alone, and surrounded by my people. Your government friends are still 10 minutes away. Your people withdrew 20 minutes ago, Curtis said calmly. I've been monitoring your radio traffic. They're not willing to die for a man who's already dying. Angelo's face darkened. How did you? Brain tumor. Glioblastoma, stage 4. You've got maybe 4 months left, not 6. That's why you're so desperate to make this personal instead of just putting a bullet in my head. Curtis took another step forward. Here's what I don't understand, Angelo. Your father was a criminal, but he was smart. Pragmatic. You're throwing away everything he built for the chance to hurt one man who was just doing his job. Just doing your job? Angelo's voice rose. You destroyed my family. Do you know what it was like growing up knowing my father's killer was out there somewhere, living freely while we suffered? I know exactly what it's like, Curtis said quietly. Because 15 years ago, I lost my wife to cancer, and I had to raise my daughter alone while carrying the weight of everything I'd done. The difference is, I chose to build something better instead of tearing down what was left. Ada spoke for the first time, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Dad, whatever you did before, it doesn't matter. This man is sick. He needs help, not revenge. Angelo whirled toward her. Shut up. You don't understand what your father took from me. Understand that you're dying, Ada said, meeting his eyes directly. And you're choosing to spend your last months hurting innocent people instead of doing something meaningful with the time you have left. Curtis saw something flicker across Angelo's face, doubt, or maybe just exhaustion. This was the moment to press. She's right, Angelo. Your father may have been a criminal, but he was also a father. What do you think he'd say about you kidnapping someone else's daughter? He'd say blood demands blood. No, Curtis said firmly. He'd say family is more important than revenge. That's why you became obsessed with finding me in the first place, because family matters to you. The sound of helicopters was getting louder now, and Curtis could see the internal conflict playing out on Angelo's face. The man wanted his revenge, but he was also running out of time and options. "It doesn't matter," Angelo said finally, pulling a pistol from his jacket. "I can still kill you both before they get here." Curtis didn't move. "You could, but then what would you have accomplished? 2 more deaths, 2 more families destroyed, and you still die knowing you wasted your last months on hatred." Angelo raised the gun, pointing it at Curtis's chest. "My father, your father would want you to live whatever time you have left with dignity," Curtis interrupted, "not throwing it away on a man who was never your real enemy." For a long moment, they stared at each other across the warehouse. Curtis could hear vehicles approaching outside. The federal response team was almost here. Then Angelo's hand began to shake, and Curtis realized the brain tumor was affecting more than just the man's judgment. His motor control was deteriorating. "Angelo," Curtis said gently, "it's over. Let it be over." The gun wavered, then slowly lowered. Angelo Law looked suddenly older, more fragile, as if the weight of his obsession had been the only thing keeping him upright. "I wanted him to be proud of me," Angelo whispered. "Then be someone he could be proud of," Curtis replied. "Help me untie my daughter, and when the federal agents arrive, tell them where the other hostages are." That's what a good son would do. Angelo stared at him for another moment, then walked over and began untying Ada's restraints. As the ropes fell away, she stood up and immediately moved to her father's side. "Dad, are you okay?" Curtis put his arm around her, finally allowing himself to feel the relief and love he'd been holding back. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Everything's going to be fine." Outside, they could hear vehicles pulling up and federal agents taking positions. Curtis looked at Angelo, who was sitting heavily in the chair Ada had just vacated. "For what it's worth," Curtis said, "your father would be proud that you made the right choice at the end." Angelo Law nodded slowly, then called out in a loud voice, "Federal agents. I'm Angelo Law, and I'm surrendering. There are other hostages in Building 3, and I have information about ongoing trafficking operations." As armed agents burst through the doors, Curtis held his daughter close and finally let himself believe that his old life was truly buried. Chapter 7. Unfinished Business. 3 days later, Curtis sat in a federal debriefing room in Denver, across from FBI Director Carmen Schneider, the same Detective Schneider who had worked Ada's case, now revealed to be working undercover for a joint task force investigating human trafficking networks. "Your real name is Carmen Schneider," Curtis said, not really asking. "Detective Carmen Schneider was my cover identity. I've been investigating Meridian Logistics for 18 months. When your daughter disappeared, we suspected it was connected to our investigation, but we had no idea who Curtis Porter really was until you started dismantling their network." Curtis leaned back in his chair. "How much of Angelo Law's operation have you rolled up?" "All of it, thanks to the intelligence you provided and his cooperation. 37 arrests across 6 states, including several high-level traffickers we've been hunting for years. Angelo's been very forthcoming about their operations." "And the other hostages?" "Rescued. 14 women and 3 men, all being held for various trafficking purposes. They're receiving medical attention and counseling." Curtis nodded, satisfied. "What happens to Angelo?" "That's complicated. He's terminally ill, and his cooperation has been invaluable. He'll likely serve his sentence in a medical facility." Carmen studied Curtis carefully. "The question is, what happens to you?" "I'm retiring. Again. Permanently this time." "Curtis, you've just demonstrated capabilities that make you extremely valuable to ongoing operations. Your handler, William Estes, has been in contact with our superiors about bringing you back in a consulting capacity." Curtis stood up. "Agent Schneider, I spent 20 years of my life in the shadows, making moral compromises I'm still paying for. My daughter almost died because of those choices. The ghost is dead, and Curtis Porter is going back to his insurance investigations." Carmen handed him a file folder. "Before you make that decision final, you should look at this." Curtis opened the folder and felt his blood chill. Photographs of Ada taken over the past 6 months, leaving her dorm, at coffee shops, studying in the library. Someone had been watching her long before Angelo Law made his move. These were found in Angelo's personal effects. He wasn't the only one looking for you, Curtis. Meridian Logistics was just one branch of a larger network. Angelo's dying confession revealed that there's a coordination council, 5 organizations working together to track down former operatives like yourself. Curtis studied the surveillance photos, his mind already shifting back into operational mode. Who are the other 4? We don't know yet. But based on the sophistication of their surveillance and the resources they're deploying, this is international. Government-level capabilities, but operating outside official channels. Rogue intelligence? Or something worse? Angelo mentioned a name before he lost consciousness yesterday. Viktor Kozlov. Does that mean anything to you? Curtis felt the room grow cold. Viktor Kozlov was a Russian FSB operative he'd neutralized in Prague 8 years ago. Supposedly neutralized. If Kozlov was alive, it meant Curtis had failed to complete a mission for the first time in his career. Agent Schneider, I need to speak with Angelo Law immediately. Curtis, he's in a medically induced coma. The tumor progressed rapidly after his arrest. Doctors say he might not wake up. Curtis closed the file and stood up. Then we have a problem. If Kozlov is coordinating this council, Ada isn't safe anywhere. None of us are. Carmen leaned forward. What are you saying? I'm saying the ghost isn't dead after all. But this time, I'm not working alone. Curtis pulled out his phone and sent an encrypted message to Mike Hurley and Josh Doherty. Phoenix reactivated. Threat level critical. Full operational authority. Agent Schneider, I need everything your task force has on international trafficking networks, and I need direct communication with CIA counterintelligence. If there's a council hunting former operatives, we're going to hunt them first. Curtis, that's not how the system works anymore. You can't just go operational without oversight. The system failed to protect my daughter, Curtis interrupted. It failed to identify a coordinated threat against American intelligence assets. Right now, I'm the only one who knows how these people think, because I used to be one of them. He headed toward the door, then paused. Agent Schneider, you can either help me do this officially, or I can do it the way I used to. But either way, I'm going to find Viktor Kozlov and end this council before they hurt anyone else's family. Carmen stared at him for a long moment, then reached for her phone. I'll make some calls. As Curtis left the federal building, he was already planning. Angelo Law had been a distraction, dangerous, but ultimately small-scale. The real threat was still out there, coordinating with other organizations, targeting other families. The ghost had been retired for 15 years, but he'd never really gone away. Now it was time to remind the world why that name had once been whispered in fear. Ada was safe for now, but Curtis knew that safety was temporary. To protect her permanently, he'd have to become the thing he'd spent 15 years trying to forget. He pulled out his phone and made a call he'd hoped never to make. William? It's Curtis. I need to know everything about Phoenix Protocol's international assets. All of them. Curtis, what's happening? War, William. Someone declared war on former operatives, and they involved my family. Now I'm going to teach them why that was a mistake. Chapter 8. The Council Exposed. 2 weeks later, Curtis stood in a secure communications facility beneath the federal building in Denver, surrounded by screens showing intelligence data from 6 different countries. Mike Hurley and Josh Doherty flanked him, while Agent Carmen Schneider coordinated with international law enforcement agencies. We've identified all 5 members of the council, Josh reported, pointing to photographs on the main display. Viktor Kozlov, Russian FSB. Maria Santos, former Colombian cartel intelligence. Chen Wei, Chinese Ministry of State Security. Dmitry Volkov, Ukrainian organized crime. And the leader, someone calling himself the architect. Curtis studied the faces, recognizing each of them from past operations. I've killed all of these people, except they're obviously not dead. The architect has been recruiting operatives who were supposedly eliminated, Carmen explained, creating new identities, providing resources, coordinating their revenge operations against former American intelligence assets. Angelo Law was just one of their tools. Mike pulled up a map showing global activities. In the past 2 years, 12 former CIA operatives have died in apparent accidents or random crimes. Now we know they were targeted killings. Curtis felt the familiar, cold calculation settling over him. What about current targets? 43 names on their list, including yours. The good news is we've identified most of their safe houses and operational bases. The bad news is they know we're onto them. Josh's computer chimed with an incoming message. Curtis, you've got a priority communication. Encrypted, bouncing through their network. Curtis sat down at the communications console. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was cultured, precise, with no identifiable accent. Ghost. Or should I call you Phoenix now? You've been quite busy. I prefer Curtis, he replied calmly. And you must be the architect. You've disrupted my carefully laid plans. The law operation was meant to be a simple elimination, but you've turned it into something much more complex. Curtis smiled grimly. That's what happens when you involve innocence. My daughter was off limits. Everyone is off limits until they're not. You of all people should understand that. What I understand is that you're hiding behind people you've manipulated into seeking revenge. That makes you a coward. The line was quiet for a moment. Then the architect laughed. Still trying to provoke emotional responses? You taught me that technique, Curtis, along with many others. Curtis felt the pieces clicking into place. Who are you? Someone who learned everything they know about psychological warfare from watching you work. Someone who spent 5 years as your protege before you betrayed them. The voice was becoming clearer now, the accent fading to reveal something familiar underneath. Curtis closed his eyes and ran through every operation, every partner, every asset he'd worked with during his 20-year career. Taylor Pearson, he said finally. Very good. I wondered how long it would take you to figure it out. Curtis remembered now. Taylor Pearson had been a brilliant young analyst who'd worked with him on 3 operations in Eastern Europe. Supposedly killed in a car bombing in Bucharest 6 years ago. But Curtis had always suspected the explosion was staged. You faked your own death. You taught me how. Emergency protocols, contingency identities, how to disappear completely. I used every technique you showed me. Why? Because you left me to die, Curtis. Prague operation, 8 years ago. When the Russians compromised our network, you evacuated everyone except me. I was captured, tortured for 6 months before I managed to escape. Curtis felt a cold weight settling in his stomach. Taylor, the extraction list came from Langley. I was told you were already dead. Convenient excuse. But doesn't matter now. I've spent 8 years building something better than government service. A network of specialists who aren't constrained by politics or oversight. Carmen was frantically typing at her console, trying to trace the call. Curtis kept talking, buying time. But you recruited people I'd killed? How does that work? Most intelligence kills aren't actually kills, Curtis. You should know that. We fake deaths, relocate assets, create new identities. I simply found your old targets and offered them something better than hiding, revenge. And if they refused, then they really did die. But most were eager to join once they understood the scope of what I was offering. Josh was signaling that he'd gotten a trace. The call was coming from somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, west of Denver. What do you want, Taylor? Originally, your death, along with everyone else who betrayed our network. But you've made this personal by disrupting my operations. Now I want something more interesting. Curtis felt the trap closing around him, which is a final operation, just like old times. You and me, using all the skills we've developed over the years. Winner takes everything. The survivor gets to decide what happens to all the names on our list. And if I refuse, then I start eliminating targets randomly, 1 per day, until you agree. Starting with your former handler, William Estes. Curtis closed his eyes. Taylor Pearson had always been brilliant, but he'd also been unstable. The torture and betrayal had apparently pushed him over the edge into something far more dangerous. Where and when? The place where this all started. Kozlov's compound in the mountains. Tomorrow at sunset. Come alone, no backup, no government support. Just you and me, settling our account. The line went dead. Carmen immediately started coordinating a response team, but Curtis was already shaking his head. No, this has to be finished the way it started. Curtis, you can't seriously be considering going alone. It's obviously a trap. Curtis stood up and began gathering his equipment. Of course it's a trap, but Taylor's right about one thing. This is personal now, and sometimes personal business has to be settled personally. Mike stepped forward. Then we're going with you. No, Taylor knows how I work, knows how I think. He'll be prepared for tactical support. But there's one thing he doesn't know. What's that? Curtis smiled grimly. I never taught him everything. Chapter 9, Ghost Protocol. The compound was 20 miles deeper into the mountains than Angelo Law's facility, accessible only by a single mountain road that wound through pine forests and granite cliffs. Curtis approached on foot, using terrain he'd scouted during his earlier reconnaissance of Meridian facilities. The sun was setting behind the western peaks, casting long shadows across the valley. Perfect time for a final confrontation. Enough light to see clearly, but enough darkness to provide concealment if needed. Curtis had spent the day in meditation and preparation, accessing the deepest levels of his training. Taylor Pearson thought he knew the ghost, but Curtis had evolved during his 15 years of retirement. The suburban father had taught him patience, perspective, and most importantly, what was truly worth fighting for. The compound consisted of 3 buildings arranged around a central courtyard. Curtis could see lights in the main structure, but no movement in the windows. Too quiet, too easy. Taylor was inside, waiting. Curtis's earpiece crackled softly. Mike and Josh were monitoring from 5 miles away, despite his instructions to stay back. Some orders were meant to be disobeyed. Phoenix, this is Overwatch. Thermal imaging shows one heat signature in the main building, 2nd floor. No other contacts visible. Copy, Overwatch. Maintain position. Curtis moved through the compound systematically, checking each building for surprises. Taylor had always been thorough, but he'd also been predictable. The ambush would come when Curtis was most vulnerable, probably when he entered the main building. But as Curtis approached the front door, he realized something was wrong. The building was too quiet, too empty. A trained operative wouldn't wait passively for his target to arrive. His phone buzzed with a text message. Wrong location, Curtis. Check your daughter's apartment. Curtis felt his world tilt. Taylor had anticipated his caution, his methodical approach. While Curtis was hunting shadows in the mountains, Taylor was going after Ada. Overwatch, abort mission. Target has moved to secondary location. I need immediate backup at my daughter's address. Curtis was already running back toward his extraction point, but the compound was 20 miles from the nearest road, and Ada's apartment was another 40 miles beyond that. Even with Mike and Josh providing transport, it would take at least an hour to reach her. His phone rang as he reached the tree line. Hello, Curtis. Taylor, if you hurt her, I'm not going to hurt her. That would be crude, simple revenge. I'm going to show her who her father really is. Curtis reached the road where Mike and Josh were waiting with their vehicle. He dove into the passenger seat as Mike gunned the engine. What do you mean? I prepared a little multimedia presentation. Videos from your greatest hits, Prague, Budapest, Marrakesh. All the people you killed, all the families you destroyed. She's watching it right now, learning about the ghost. Curtis felt something cold and sharp twist in his chest. Taylor, she doesn't need to know about that life. Everyone needs to know who they really are, Curtis. You taught me that. The vehicle raced down the mountain road, Mike taking curves at dangerous speeds while Josh coordinated with law enforcement agencies. But Curtis knew they wouldn't reach Ada in time. What do you want, Taylor? I want you to choose. Come to her apartment alone, and I'll let her live with the knowledge of who her father really is. Bring backup, and she dies never knowing why. Curtis closed his eyes and accessed the coldest, most calculating part of himself. Taylor had made one critical error. He thought Ada would be horrified by the truth about her father's past. But Curtis had raised his daughter to understand that people could change, that the past didn't define the future. Taylor, you're about to learn something I never taught you. What's that? The difference between being feared and being loved. Curtis hung up and called Ada directly. She answered on the first ring. Dad, there's a man here, and he's been showing me videos. Ada, listen to me carefully. Everything you're seeing is true. I used to do terrible things for my government, and I made enemies. One of those enemies is there with you now. Dad, let me finish. Everything I did before you were born, I did so that you could grow up in a world where people like me weren't necessary. I'm not proud of my past, but I'm not ashamed of why I changed. There was a pause, then Ada's voice, steady and strong. Dad, I don't care what you used to do. I care about who you are now. Curtis smiled, feeling a weight lift from his chest. That's my girl. Now, is Taylor still there? He's listening. He looks confused. Curtis could imagine Taylor's expression. The man had spent years planning this moment, anticipating Curtis's shame and Ada's horror. He'd never considered that love might be stronger than fear. Put him on the phone, sweetheart. Taylor's voice came through the line, but it lacked its earlier confidence. That's not how this was supposed to go. Taylor, you've spent 8 years learning how to manipulate people through fear and hatred. But you never learned what I discovered after I retired, that forgiveness is more powerful than revenge. She should hate you for what you've done. Maybe, but she doesn't because she knows who I am now. Just like I know who you are now. Not the brilliant analyst I once worked with, but a broken man who spent 8 years poisoning himself with bitterness. Curtis could hear police sirens in the background through the phone. Carmen had coordinated the response, and law enforcement was surrounding Ada's building. It's over, Taylor. You can surrender and get the help you need, or you can add one more tragedy to your list. But either way, this ends now. The line was quiet for a long moment. Then Curtis heard Ada's voice. He's crying, Dad. I think he's more sad than angry. Curtis felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. The responsibility he'd carried for 20 years, knowing that every action had consequences that rippled outward in ways he couldn't always predict. Taylor, he said gently, we all made choices that seemed right at the time. You're not the villain here, and I'm not the hero. We're just two people who got lost in the dark for a while. I wanted to hurt you the way you hurt me. I know, and you succeeded. The thought of losing Ada terrified me more than anything I faced in 20 years of operations. But fear doesn't have to define us. Curtis could hear movement through the phone, law enforcement entering the building. Tell me how this ends, Curtis. However you choose to end it. You can spend whatever time you have left trying to build something better than what you've been building. Or you can let the darkness win. Another long pause, then Taylor's voice, barely audible. I surrender. I'm putting down my weapon and surrendering. Curtis felt 15 years of tension leave his body as he heard his daughter's voice again. Dad, it's over. He's surrendering to the police. I love you, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. I love you too, Dad. All of you, past, present, and future. Curtis closed his phone and leaned back in his seat as Mike continued driving toward Denver. Josh was already coordinating with federal agencies to roll up the remaining members of Taylor's council. Is it really over? Mike asked. Curtis thought about that question as they descended from the mountains toward the lights of the city. The ghost was finally dead, not because Curtis had buried him, but because Ada had seen him and chosen love over fear. Yeah, he said finally. It's really over. Epilogue. 6 months later. Curtis Porter sat in his home office, reviewing legitimate insurance files and enjoying the mundane reality of his suburban life. Ada was finishing her senior year at Colorado State, having decided to pursue a career in international law focused on human trafficking prevention. Agent Carmen Schneider had become a regular visitor, not for operational reasons, but because she and Curtis had discovered they shared a love of chess and complicated moral questions. The ghost's knowledge of international criminal networks had proved invaluable in dismantling several trafficking operations, but always through legal channels and proper oversight. Taylor Pearson was receiving psychiatric treatment at a federal medical facility, his cooperation having helped identify and capture the remaining members of his council. Curtis visited him monthly, not out of obligation, but because he understood that redemption was possible for anyone willing to seek it. The Curtis Porter identity was no longer a cover story. It had become the truth. His phone rang, interrupting his work. Unknown number. Mr. Porter? This is Detective Mike Holy with Denver PD. We got a case that might benefit from your insurance investigation expertise. Curtis smiled. His former teammate had joined the police force after their final operation, bringing military precision to civilian law enforcement. What kind of case, detective? Missing person. Young woman, college student. Disappeared 3 days ago under suspicious circumstances. Curtis felt the familiar stirring of purpose, but this time it was different. Not the cold calculation of the ghost, but the warm determination of a father who had learned that protecting innocence was the highest calling. I'll be right there. Some ghosts needed to stay buried. Others needed to be transformed into something better. Curtis Porter closed his laptop, kissed the photograph of Ada on his desk, and went to do what he'd always done best: help people find their way home.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.